Welcome to the Prison Pod, a podcast for all people experiencing incarceration. The mission of this podcast is to save lives, restore hope, reduce suffering, and recidivism. Many show ideas come directly from the listeners, so please write the host. Prison Pod, Post Office Box 294, Orono, Maine, 04473. Here is your host, Ms. Valerie.
Welcome to the Prison Pod. This is season 5. I can't believe it. 2026 is here. Today we have Sephria Reynolds-Tanner joining us. She is a criminal justice and drug policy analyst at Reason Foundation. Her work is focused on evidence-based practices, risk and needs assessments, and reducing barriers to successful reentry. Welcome, Sephria, to the Prison Pod.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
And is it my understanding you're joining us from Hawaii today?
Yes, I am. I'm located in Hawaii. We're actually moving to California soon, so I'll be on the mainland soon.
Oh, wow. About as far away from Maine as you can get and still be in the United States.
Yes.
So I'm real curious, what inspired your work with the Reason Foundation?
Yes, so I'll just go a little bit brief about my career. So prior to being at the Reason Foundation, I was at the Council of State Government Justice Center, and I was a policy analyst working on similar work there. And then prior to policy, I was actually working in the field as a probation parole officer in the state of Washington. I did county probation for about a year, and then I did about almost 5 years with community corrections at the Washington Department of Corrections. So having that experience, working in the field, seeing how policies kind of come into play, how they're practiced in actual real life versus what's on paper, I decided that I would go the route of kind of changing policy so that I can help people on a broader scale versus just direct service. And that's kind of my background in that. But on a personal level, I'm one of the only individuals in my direct family who is not justice involved. So I think that going through that, having family members who have suffered with, addiction, been in and out of the system, that's kind of why I have this passion for this.
So you must really have a good understanding about some of the barriers that happen when somebody is in prison and when they come home with the families and how they are directly affected.
Yes, exactly. Barriers such as, when you're on probation and parole, you have those conditions you have to abide by. Lawful, employment. But what comes with that? You have to have an identification card. You have to have a social security card, birth certificate, all of these things. And when somebody gets released, sometimes they don't have those documents. So those barriers are huge. We really fight at Reason, to really bring that and lift up those barriers and really understand kind of how somebody is moving through the system, even when they do release, and what the reentry process looks like and the barriers that they face, and trying to rectify that with, trying to pass legislation and working with local policymakers to really try to, lift up lived experience and really try to bring their voices into our work. That's one of my main huge passions is, lived experience individuals. They know the system better than we do and what will actually work for them. So giving them the ability to, get back their dignity and self-actualize, and really, really hone in on what works for them. And so that's really what I try to lift up in this space for sure.
That's really great because so many times we do what we think is best for the person, and sometimes we don't have a clue of what the need really is.
Exactly.
Yeah, and I think it's so important to have the lived experience at the table, especially when it comes to like probation and parole. There's so many different things that they have to deal with when they're coming home and going through that. I'm curious with when you was doing probation, did they have a set date and time that they came, or did they just say the third Monday of the month?
It depends on the parole officer or probation officer. I think a lot of officers try to say, oh, this is my report day. You need to report on this day by this time. I was very different. A lot of these individuals have families, they have employment, they have a lot of things. And so I really tried to, if they had to work very early, I would show up very early on one day and say, hey, I'm going to be here at this time for you to check in and do what you need to do before you go to work so that I'm not taking time out of your day and you could still go to work and we're not showing up at your work. I think a lot of probation parole officers, they do field contacts and they go into these individuals' employment, and that just doesn't look good for them. We kind of have to separate that a little bit. And I understand public safety and all of those things. accountability as well. But at the same time, we have to set these people up to be successful. And so, how I kind of started with that interaction when I would first meet somebody who was releasing, I would say, hey, you know, all of the expectations on paper because it's right here. But what are your expectations for me as your parole officer? And how can I help you become a better person for yourself and for your family and help you move through these barriers? So that's kind of how I supervised. I kind of thought about it as I hope that my siblings, you know, have a probation parole officer like me that really helps them. And so that's kind of my mentality.
Yeah, probation is really tough. And I would think that, first of all, you're very young looking. I don't know how old you are, but you can't be as young as you look because you have so much experience. But I would think that that might have really been, well, maybe some guys showed up for probation more than normal because of it. But did it ever cause any problems with you being a probation officer and not being what people think of as the typical stern man behind the desk?
I would say yes and no. I feel like it depends on the individual. I think obviously when somebody is meeting their parole officer for the first time, they're very skeptical. I mean, they should be, right? I feel like you should have expectations for them and you should know the policies. And I think a lot of individuals don't know their rights when they, you know, are on probation and parole. Probation and parole is a form of a diversion program. This is not something to throw you back inside and we look at what the data is saying with the, you know, technical violations, and 80% of individuals that are reincarcerated are sitting in jail for technical violations over not showing up on time or not passing a, you know, a UA. And instead of incarcerating them, let's really look at the need that they have. And that's, you know, getting education, getting, you know, substance abuse and that type of programming, like what type of programming. And I think we focus so much on the risk that that person, you know, risk to public safety versus what are their actual needs. And reentry should start before they release. And that was a big thing for me is working with the, you know, career counselors inside of the prison and kind of making sure that continuum of care is passed on into the field.
I've talked to a lot of people that are justice involved that have said reentry really needs to start the day you step in the door.
Yeah.
Because you have to have, this is one thing that I'm realizing now is people need to have that attitude of not, well, I'm in this prison every single day. There's nothing to do. There is a lot you can do while you're incarcerated as far as working on yourself. And that should be the number one priority because those that are going home, you want to be able to have those skills that you need, even the soft skills.
Right. And you know, we say all the time these people are going to get out eventually. They're going to be part of your community eventually. So why not pour all the resources that we can while they're inside to really set them up for when they do release, they feel good about themselves. You know, they have all of these resources that were provided to them before they release. They're still getting them when they get out, really making sure that we set them up to be successful and having a little bit of grace and understanding that everybody makes mistakes and it's okay. You know, substance abuse is a big one, and especially within my family. And, you know, it's not linear. There's going to be times that you do mess up or you do relapse, but it's what you do with that and how you move forward.
Yeah. I wish they had a way of incorporating the probation date and medication assisted treatment, at the same time, because like a lot of people that I've worked with that are on probation are using some type of medication because they were opiate users and
Right.
they have to go to the doctors every single week for that and their probation officer every week. And it's
Yep.
almost impossible to keep a job.
Exactly. And that is why when I was a probation parole officer, I really made sure that I was available at times, even if it was staying later or going in early, because that is very true. We expect a lot from them, and they are spread so thin a lot of the times because they have conditions they have to comply with either the Corps or the parole board or just Department of Corrections in general. And so I think having a probation parole officer that is able to look at that from a different lens and say, you know what, this is a lot on you. Let's kind of make it a little bit easier for you to check in. And maybe if you can't come to me, I'll come to you. And a lot of the times, if I had to see somebody at their job, I would just say, hey, wave at me from the front door. I'm not going to get out of my car because we're wearing all the gear. And that just doesn't
Right.
look right. And employers don't want that inside of their, you know, facilities or in their place of employment.
I'm thinking about policy and writing all this stuff, and all I keep hearing is my statistics class in school, and It seems like such a boring job, but I don't think it really is. Can you tell me some of the things that perk you up about your job and those things that happen that make the job worth doing?
Yes, of course. So working in policy can be difficult. I mean, there's times, especially right now, a lot of, things are very hard on crime in our environment and our political landscape. But I think coming from a different lens of, hey, this is what the research says, evidence says this, and that's kind of how we back up what we're saying, right? And yeah, it can get very boring, but at the same time, we have to provide some type of evidence for these policymakers to make sound decisions of, yes, it worked in this state, it's worked in this state, this policy works here. And so what I really enjoy about my job is the implementation part of that, which is working with local governments and working, a lot. We do a lot of legislative work within reason, but prior to reason, when I was working at the Council of State Government Justice Center, we did a lot of implementation. So we had working groups with local governments. We were working with city, county, and state probation parole offices and making sure that their policies and procedures, not just legislatively, but administratively, were the same. And that was I love that part of it because you're working from the bottom up and it's not a top down mentality where you're passing these policies and you're like, this is going to work because evidence says this. But at the same time, every single state is different. Every person is different. Every agency is different. And so what really gets me excited and the passion for this is at the end of the day, if we are trying to pass legislation in a state that says that Department of Corrections, is to provide identification cards for people when they release so that one, when they get out, they get a check from, DOC. They don't have an ID to actually cash the check, right? And so those little things where you don't really think about if you're not going through the system, those are big. And so us being able to go into a state and say and talk to a policymaker and say, hey, like at the end of the day, this is going to help out. This is going to be an effort in which at the end of the day, you may fit the bill for this in the beginning, but at the end of the day, it's better for the person. It helps not the revolving door come back and forth with these people coming in and out. And that's my biggest thing is trying to support individuals while they're out so that they do not go back because they lose everything when they go back. They lose, connections with their family members. They lose their occupations and they have to start all over, even if it's for, a week or two that they're spending inside for a technical violation that could have been, a different type of punishment at the end of the day. They could have done something else instead of being reincarcerated.
Thank you for addressing that because that's one thing that really bothers me about, I can understand if somebody recommits a crime going back, but with the technical issues around probation, it can be as late as it could be 5 minutes late on curfew, you know, as two or three of those things add up, they end up getting arrested and they can lose their job and their place to live and everything that they've taken a year to build. So that does make it difficult. We're going to take a brief break here to hear from our sponsors, and we'll be right back.
Attention! Choreo, a better way to connect with loved ones who are incarcerated. Without Choreo, family and friends wait for a call and hope they can answer. With Choreo, inmates can call or message at any time. When your inmate calls their Choreo number, they will hear your voice and text messages. Inmates receive and leave messages at any time using standard prison phones, making connection easy and predictable. For information about Choreo, visit choreo.org. Stay connected.
Welcome back to the Prison Pod. I want to remind people we're talking with Sephria Reynolds-Tanner and about the work that she does at Reason Foundation. Now I'm going to change my questioning to something totally different. I'm wondering if you have a favorite book.
I think because a lot of the research that I read, I'm always reading, but I don't necessarily have a favorite book. I think what I spend my time doing is reading a lot of research and policies and current legislation to stay most updated. So I would not say that I have a favorite book right now.
Yeah, you sound very much like me. I don't do a lot of fun reading anymore.
No, but
And
I
now
should.
did I hear that you went to college in Alaska?
Yes, I finished my degree up in Alaska. I actually started my degree in forensic science whenever I got out of high school. I'm originally from New Mexico. So I went to Eastern New Mexico University for a couple years, and then I joined the military. So I was in the United States Navy for a couple years, and then I served my time there, got out, and wow, I need to finish my bachelor's degree. So I went up to Alaska, and I spent the last 2 years of my degree in Alaska getting my degree in justice there.
That's incredible because most people, their dreams are either to go to Alaska or Hawaii, and you've had the opportunity to be in both, so it's quite the
Yes, I'm very
difference.
grateful.
What are some of the things that you're working on right now?
Yes, so I'm working on a policy brief around medical marijuana use with probation and parolees. I think there's a lot of states who have legalized that. So we're looking at what that looks like in every single state, why an individual who has a medical marijuana card or documentation from a doctor cannot consume based on maybe the nature of their crime or their, pre-sentence investigation says they were under the influence of marijuana at the time. So a lot of entities and agencies will say, oh, you cannot consume marijuana because you were under the influence at the time of your crime and those different type of things. So I'm looking at what the political landscape looks like for that and looking at the current policies and procedures and provisions and laws in several different states and really advocating for individuals who have those medical needs and have that medical marijuana card that they can consume, because there's a lot of research around opioid use and people using marijuana to not consume opioids. So I think that there's a lot of research there. And if somebody is able to use a substance that they're prescribed, why can't they use, marijuana if they're prescribed that? So I'm working on that. We're also working on a policy brief around fines and fees and forfeitures in several different states. So looking at speed trap laws and looking at how much local governments are making from that and just looking at the revenue that local governments are getting from those types of laws and really just kind of mapping out what that looks like in each state. So tons of policy briefs. There's some commentary going on, and especially with the legislative session kicking back up. And we have several different bills that we're tracking, just looking at what's going on in the criminal justice reform area in several different states. So that's kind of what I've been working on.
I think around the medical marijuana, now that they've reclassified it, I think there's going to be a lot more research available and being
Yes.
done so that they can really pinpoint what all the different parts, because the CBDs, cannabinoids, and terpenes, and they all work differently within the body and in the brain. So I think that that might really help a lot as far as people being able to make the decisions of the medical side of that.
Right. And I think that will really help with advocating for what we're trying to bring to light in my policy brief of, allowing these individuals to consume if a medical physician says. I think we go to the doctor and they give us, medication and they say take it as prescribed. And I feel like it should be treated the same way.
Let's see. So do you take vacations?
I do. My wife is actually from Puerto Rico, so I've been to Puerto Rico a couple times. I lived in Seattle for a long time, so we go to Seattle a lot. I have
Wonderful.
family in Arizona, New Mexico, so try to go back there. We really try to go on vacation, but I think living in Hawaii, it takes a long time to get to places. And I'm actually currently in a fellowship program with the Koch Associate program. And so we get to go to DC a couple times a year. So I've been to DC a couple times and really learning, what's going on with policymakers in DC. And it's a form of like a professional development course for mid-level careers. And that's been amazing. That's what I've been doing through Reason as well. That's how I got wrapped up in Reason. And I'm just really grateful for that experience.
Can you tell us a little more about Reason Foundation?
Yes. So the Reason Foundation was actually a magazine. And so Libertarian, now they have a policy team, and the criminal justice policy team is fairly new. I work on both, but I work on both the drug policy team and the criminal justice policy team. But a lot of my work, because I have the experience of being in the field in criminal justice, is in the criminal justice team. I've been here for maybe 6 months, so I'm also still learning about a lot of what Reason does. I think, if you go online and you read a lot of our policy briefs, I mean, we have all the way from what's going on in drug policy, all the way to what's going on in transportation. There's several different areas. We have pensions, we have several different subjects that we cover, and it's mostly, working with policymakers and really bringing up to light those different aspects in several different subjects. So that's what the policy team does. And then you have the magazine team that, puts out the magazine. They have their own things that they do. We don't really work with them as much, but they are a part of Reason. So there's two separate kind of aspects of Reason. And I'm more on the policy side and the research side of things.
And I'm assuming people can just look that up in a Google search and find it.
Yes. Yes, and you'll see too, and when you go to reason.org, that you'll see all of the subjects and anything from transportation, like I was saying, drug policy, pensions, all of those things. You'll see all of that. There's, several different areas a policy that we cover. And we have a huge team, tons of individuals that come from every different walks of life. And we're kind of like entrepreneurs in our space. So they really lean into that. So I really like that aspect about Reason, that I can come to my team and say, hey, I want to talk about technical violations and what's going on with that. Or there's new research on crisis response and what's going on with that, or police-led diversion programs. And they're very open to whatever, us as the subject matter experts want to talk about. And I really enjoy that about Reason.
And do you have a lot of freedom to do some of this on your own? Or I'm always curious
Yes.
how much oversight there is, or because,
We
when you're
have a
doing
lot of
research,
freedom.
that's
Yeah, we have
great.
a lot of freedom, and it's really nice because we can come into a meeting and say, "Hey, did you see this new, research that just came out? Let's talk about this." And they're very open, and we practice a lot of openness, and it's a very inclusive type of environment, and I really truly enjoy everybody that I work with. I mean, we have fellowships that are there that, are lawyers. We have people who have PhDs, everywhere. We have clinicians. We have so many individuals that come from very different places of work, but when we all come together, we work on things. There's even a housing team. There's just a lot of different topics that we cover.
It used to be very kind of a male-dominated field. Has that changed a little bit?
I would say yes. I feel like it has changed. I feel like, coming from a very male dominated field as far as corrections and community corrections, you're starting to see, that kind of go away. I think everybody's starting to be open to that, and that's exciting. I feel like I wouldn't be the only woman working, as a parole officer in the office. I had several, women above me that I looked up to. I had, a probation manager when I was at county probation that was a woman, and that was amazing to see. And, it's inspiring for us who are, I'm 33. So coming into this space and, seeing women who are above me, and that is a motivation for me that I have a place here in this. So
I think that a lot of times having women in the area of corrections balances out some of the emotions, and softens it up and gives the guys a chance to listen a little bit better.
yes, yes.
So is there anything that you're dying to get off your chest or talk about that we didn't cover?
I would just say that, having family members that are, cycling in and out of, the system, and me having the passion for that, I feel like, treating people that they are people and they're not defined by their criminal history and they're not defined by what's on paper, I think is very important. And I think being open to doing things a different way and, having a different point of view on things. And just because you don't agree with what's going on doesn't mean that your opinion isn't valuable. I think coming together, and especially in this political climate now, people having different ideas of what's going on and different point of views and coming from different walks of life, I think being open and having those hard conversations is very important. And I just want people to know that have lived experience, that are incarcerated, that there are people out here that care about you and that want to see you succeed. And I get emotional talking about it because I'm very passionate. So excuse me.
That's okay, because I feel exactly the same way, that we're dealing with human beings.
Yes.
And we forget sometimes that they're not just, people have the wrong attitude, that they're in cages and put them away and forget about them. You
Yeah.
feel differently when it's somebody that you love and care about. And
Yes.
and a lot of those people that have those thoughts and ideas have never stepped foot in a correctional facility.
Exactly.
So until you know what you're talking about. They say, until you walk a
Yes.
mile in my shoes.
Yes, and a lot of those mentalities are changing. You see a lot of correctional programs like the Amend program from Norway. You see that coming up to light, and you see how correctional officers are actually playing basketball with some of the people that are inside and just really creating a community, and that's what they need. They need to feel like they're supported regardless if they're inside or not. And that's very big for me is, giving them their own agency and their own dignity back, that they have control over their own lives, even though, they're being told what to wear, where to go, what to do. They still should be able to have that agency to make their own decisions. So,
Exactly. Well, I appreciate you joining the Prison Pod today so much. You've really educated me on the work that you're doing, and it even made me look at statistics a little differently.
yes, I think evidence based, you hear that term a lot, and I truly appreciate your time. And I'm happy to be here and would love to come back.
Thanks so much. We'll probably check in again with you.
Yes.
I want to remind our listeners that we've been talking with Sephria Reynolds-Tanner today. She has been talking about her work at the Reason Foundation. I want to thank you once again, Sephria, for being here.
Thank
And
you.
I hope everyone has a great week, and we'll be back in another week with another edition of the Prison Pod.
You have been listening to the Prison Pod, a podcast not just for those in prison but for anyone who has been affected by incarceration. Ms. Valerie would love for you to write to her with your questions, comments, and show ideas. The address is Prison Pod, Post Office Box 294, Orono, Maine. 04473.